Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I gotta tell you, being an entrepreneur, I will not go through the rest of my career without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, piracetam, modafinil, Nupep, uridine monophosphate. I mean, phenylpiracetam, forget it. You could always have a better brain.
The Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 62 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Ballo. We're going to talk about chronic fatigue syndrome today. We're going to talk about one of the most powerful nootropic compounds, blood-brain barrier crossing nootropic compounds there is, called alpha lipoic acid, and how taking that in relation to a particular type of chronic fatigue syndrome, because I think there's different reasons for people being massively debilitatingly fatigued, and it's not necessarily one thing or the other. It seems to be many systems, and sometimes there's just different reasons. It's not kind of all the same. But for this particular reason, which is oxidative stress, we're going to talk about alpha lipoic acid in response to it. I had a run-in with chronic fatigue syndrome for just about 2 years after a stint with mono, basically the Epstein-Barr virus, which causes mono. By the way, if you hear people beeping and road stuff, I'm on the road. People beeping at me. They're like, hey, that's the nootropics guy. And so, but yeah, it took me quite some time to figure out. I basically had to go on the fringes of naturopathy and figure things out for myself, because my GP and then ensuing specialists were not very helpful in trying to identify exactly why I couldn't recover from the Epstein-Barr virus and the ensuing mono. There's this thing where folks who get mono, especially later on in life, there's a post-viral fatigue syndrome that tends to last for years for some people decades. It's a very atrocious syndrome. It's a very atrocious set of symptoms. It is debilitating for sure. And it happened to me, but I figured it out. So I kind of want to just talk about that, going that route with ALA, taking that route of chronic fatigue syndrome, because again, there's two different, there's two primary different things as far as I'm concerned that cause chronic fatigue syndrome. There's probably more, but we'll just talk about those two, and then one specifically in using ALA in response to it. But let's do a minute of Product Pro, because what sponsors and supports this broadcast are powerful nootropic products. So powerful that they are labeled elite level nootropic products by the people that take them. We've got pro poker players using our products. We got business people using our stuff. People from around the world that want to get productivity, that want to get brain performance, real estate agents, other business folks, everybody in between, anyone you can think of takes the Cortex stack. Let's start with the Cortex stack. Number one, we got a pre-made stack. It's very powerful. Cortex is a motivation, speed of processing, mental energy type of stack, right? It turns on verbal fluency, a bunch of other things, but it is primarily that. It is strong. That was the intention. We really wanted to build a nootropic stack that turns the lights on. The chief complaint among people around the pre-made stacks that existed were they were noticeable, and you could focus a little more, but they weren't substantially strong. We changed the game with the Cortex nootropic stack. Right now, $27 this weekend, $27 for the mighty Cortex. Get a bottle, get two. Get it at livecortex.com. We wrote 5 digital guides that teach you how to use nootropics. One that is for people new to nootropics. It's called Smarter, Better, Faster. It's a surgical guide to using nootropics for total mental dominance. Gives you lots of stacks, lots of strategies, lots of questions answered. But the other stacks are primarily stack lists. Like the Nupep Pro Stack List is a giant list of mighty powerful Nupep stacks. The Racetam God Guide is a giant list. It's about 80 or so Racetam nootropic stacks that are exceptionally powerful. And then there is the nootropic stack for the business professional, which is a guide of 100 modafinil, uridine, theacrine, aniracetam, oxiracetam, and other nootropic stacks, all targeted toward business. Get that at livecortex.com. All these guys, by the way, are digital. These are digital downloadable guides that give you very many powerful stacks. They're all 20% off right now. Then lastly, there's the Nootropic Starter Pack. The Nootropic Starter Pack is a bottle of Cortex and Smarter, Better, Faster, digital version of Smarter, Better, Faster, which is our guide that teaches you how to use nootropics. Just stop right here. If you're new to nootropics, get the starter pack. You get a bottle of Cortex, get to try one of the most, the best pre-made stacks out there, according to our customers, and Smarter, Better, Faster, our digital guide. Okay, thanks for hanging through me with the sponsors. All that stuff supports the broadcast. It is essential right now that we move a lot of Cortexes. We've got a lot of inventory coming in. We've got Cortex at $27. All right, so snag a bottle of what's being called the only pre-made stack at livecortex.com. Okay. So just to preface, chronic fatigue syndrome is the super debilitating syndrome in which the fatigue that one endures and has to endure and goes through is much higher on the level than regular fatigue. Like you'll often hear people with CFS, as it's abbreviated, complaining that other people say, "Oh, well, I'm tired too." Chronic fatigue syndrome is not tiredness. It's not chronic tiredness. It's not even really chronic fatigue as it typically is experienced in people. Chronic fatigue syndrome, in most cases, is almost a complete shutdown of mitochondrial function. That is, the powerhouses that produce energy in your body and allow you to actually exist and have energy to walk around, to say things, to think things. That stuff is massively deteriorated. I mean, it is essentially held hostage by any number of insults, sort of chemical insults, molecular insults, that are taking place in the body. The mitochondria downregulates so hard, and in some cases, mitochondria is poisoned by heavy metals, toxicity, etc., massive oxidative stress, that the stuff doesn't function right. So picture this. Picture having the flu, and picture the worst flu you had. Okay, and then just take away all the respiratory symptoms, like the breathing problems and the stuffy nose or runny nose or whatever, all that stuff, and just leave that debilitating, I cannot move, I have to lay down mode there, and then multiply it by 3 or 4. Okay, it's debilitating, completely debilitating, even for some of the most hard-charging people in the world. It will take you out. I don't care how strong your resolve is, how tough you think you are. Okay, if you get chronic fatigue syndrome, especially mitochondrial-based chronic fatigue syndrome, you're going to be out. And you're going to be out for quite some time, and you're going to need to fix your mitochondria. And if you don't, it can last 10 years, 20 years. It can change the rest of your life. You can be disabled. Many people that have it are disabled. That's chronic fatigue syndrome. It is a mitochondrial dysfunction at its root. The particular type of chronic fatigue syndrome that I'm going to talk about is, it can be in response to many things. It could be in response to a virus. In my case, it was the Epstein-Barr virus, which gave me mono, which essentially is a liver disease, among other things, but, has the capacity to mess with mitochondria. It can be in response to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where gram-positive and or gram-negative, just bad bacteria, grow in the intestines, particularly the small intestine. And those bacteria, what's the outer membrane of those bacteria is toxins. They're called endotoxins. I think the specific name for them is lipopolysaccharides. These lipopolysaccharides get released in your bloodstream. They either end up in your brain or they send inflammatory cytokines to your brain, and that causes massive fatigue. Now, I'm not just pulling this from nowhere. There's many studies that demonstrate exactly this. The people with chronic fatigue syndrome, number one, have massive oxidative stress. Number two, have massive mitochondrial insults. And number three, have a massive increase in the quantity of inflammatory cytokines that are found in their brains. Right, their immune systems, there's some sort of immune response that's releasing these cytokines, and it ends up in their brains. Okay, so that's chronic fatigue syndrome. There's other things that, just to quickly touch on, the other things that could be causing it, that could cause such a syndrome, where you have significant, continuous, debilitating, like 3 or 4x flu-like fatigue that doesn't go away, doesn't change when you rest, right? It is persistent. You can't work out. You can't do much. You can't think. You can't move. You can't work. Totally disabling. And that is one of the things. Well, let's just quickly break down into one major category, but 2 things. And these are hormonal problems. Number one, a thyroid problem. You've got, subclinical hypothyroidism, meaning like your thyroid numbers look fine, but the doctor hasn't really investigated further into deeper metrics. And if you ran some more panels on, I guess TS3 and TS4, just got a little deeper. An endocrinologist could probably answer this a lot better than me. But suffice it to say, I studied it enough, going through it all. They would find that folks have some degree of thyroid dysregulation, thyroid output dysregulation, and this, among that really catalyzes a bunch of things that can cause a debilitating fatigue. The other, which is equally hormonal, is something very simple, and frankly, something I think a lot of the paleo folks run into, which is low aldosterone. Aldosterone is merely a hormone that controls fluid balance, particularly salt balance in your body. If you don't have high levels of aldosterone, you will urinate out all your salt, particularly in response to diuretics like alcohol and coffee, right? So you got to be very, very careful if you're one of those people who has low aldosterone. That's something you can get your GP to test for. or an endocrinologist or something to test for so that you can identify it. But suffice it to say, it's an issue. One of the chief complaints of people on the ketogenic diet is constant urination. And, there's this known thing that you have to keep up with electrolytes because you start peeing out your electrolytes. It's just a thing that happens. One of the reasons that happens is because of low aldosterone. Okay. And one of the reasons that happens, who knows? I think it's more than likely related to not the high intake of fat, but the absence of dietary carbohydrates. Okay. So that causes a syndrome, right? Where you have very low sodium, very low chloride. You're peeing out a lot, therefore, of sodium and chloride. You have low aldosterone. That makes it so that you don't retain a whole lot of water either. So you're basically peeing out you're urinating out what constitutes your bodily fluids that allow you to have energy and to feel good. When that happens, you can run into a persistent, debilitating fatigue. There is no question about it, okay? But we're not going to talk about responding to that, how to fix that. That's for another podcast. The former situation where you've got mitochondrial dysfunction, whether Epstein-Barr induced or heavy metal toxicity induced or otherwise induced. And by the way, I mean, there is a functional medicine doctor. I forget the guy's name, but I wish I could remember off the top of my head. But on YouTube, where this guy demonstrated that inside of the mitochondria for one of his chronic fatigue patients, he found heavy metals. He found a bunch of random foreign substances. And once he figured out through a detox system how to clean those things out, then they retested the mitochondria, found out within the cells there weren't as high levels of heavy metals. This was commensurate with the person actually feeling better. So whatever the cause is, Epstein-Barr, heavy metals, oxidative stress, here's my take on alpha-lipoic acid in relation to it. Alpha-lipoic acid is a massive antioxidant. It crosses over the blood-brain barrier, increases brain glutathione, increases glutathione kind of in general, increases the quantity of acetylcholine that gets released in the brain. And it has been demonstrated in actual papers, actual studies, to regenerate liver cells. I mean, literally take people from near acute liver failure to totally recovered with ALA. It's also used to chelate from heavy metals in the body, probably in the mitochondria. It is an exceptionally powerful compound. I take it, alpha-lipoic acid, every day of my life. I take some in the morning. I take some before I go out and consume alcohol. It makes it so that some of the particularly sick-esque feelings that one might experience the next day after certain alcohol consumption, not a lot. I mean, there's a certain threshold you cross over, you're going to be hungover either way. But I always feel super great while consuming alcohol, and it's because I take alpha-lipoic acid before in a couple 100 milligram quantities. So that's ALA. It can stack with many, many racetams, many cholinergic compounds, many, many other nootropics. It's one of my favorite nootropic compounds in the world. Alpha-lipoic acid should not be underestimated. 100 to 300 milligrams is the dose range for nootropic benefits. But then when you're talking about, fixing mitochondria and really focusing on detoxing your body, running through a detox system and trying to help, especially in response to chronic fatigue syndrome, you might be looking at 300 to 600 milligrams on a very consistent basis, meaning every day for quite some time. What I would say about chronic fatigue syndrome as it relates to Epstein-Barr virus and then mitochondrial damage in response to that virus and mono and whatever else might happen downstream is that for me, once I got on a very, very intense detox program. And when I say detox program, I just mean trying to facilitate the body's natural detox systems. You got phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox that takes place in the liver. You have your lymphatic system, which it's fluid that tries to carry toxins out of your body. And then primarily you have your small and large intestines. You have your large bowel. You basically waste out toxins. And if they sit there for a long time, like if your bowels aren't moving particularly, if you don't optimize the speed with which your bowels move, if you're kind of constipated, that's going to spell absolute trouble for people with chronic fatigue syndrome. And many people that have chronic fatigue syndrome have slowed gut motility. And that might even cause the syndrome itself and the mitochondrial issue might slow motility, which then keeps this vicious circle. So it's an absolute mess. But so let me just make this definitive and succinct. When I was getting over Epstein-Barr virus and mono, the Epstein-Barr virus was out of my blood. We had identified it was in there prior to that. I was just really dealing with a post-viral fatigue that was going on. My mitochondria were damaged. I went and did a whole bunch of blood tests, and we tested a bunch of stuff. I went on a program that I essentially devised, which is the basis for a consulting program we have called Chronic Fatigue Syndrome Consulting. We actually consult on this and can help folks, which consisted of cardio, lots of cardio, not in high quantities, but just frequently. So 2 runs a day. They were 2 or 3 mile runs. They don't have to be significant. Of course, a significant amount of water consumption. Really just kind of flush things out, keep everything flowing, particularly keep you urinating, keep you hydrated, and the most significant thing for me, and I think for a lot of people in that situation, was the continuous use of alpha lipoic acid. I mean, once I discovered it and realized maybe there really is large scale oxidative damage going on, and I need to target this. Reading about it, understanding there is oxidative damage, demonstrated in studies. Now we know that's one of the major markers of chronic fatigue syndrome, at least as it relates to mitochondrial dysfunction, is this oxidative stress. That's when I knew, okay, alpha lipoic acid really needs to be top on my list. I had tried glutathione, but it wasn't really a bioavailable source. I really wanted to try liposomal glutathione, but I just didn't get around to it. So I went on to alpha lipoic acid. Immediately, and I mean within an hour and some change, the alpha lipoic acid completely changed the game. I mean, going from massive debilitating fatigue to almost feeling normal, like a state that I hadn't been in quite some time, because I was dealing with mono. Mono's terrible, and the ensuing damage that takes place with mono is absolutely terrible. I could not believe how much better I felt from alpha lipoic acid. My dose was 300 milligrams at a time, and I was sort of dosing it frequently throughout the day. I might dose 300 milligrams in the morning with a little bit of coffee, 300 milligrams somewhere around 12 or 1 p.m., 300 milligrams somewhere around 6 p.m., and then another 300 milligrams later on in the day. And then in some cases, I'd sort of dial it down a bit and just go with 600 milligrams total in a day, split up in 2 increments of 300 milligrams, once in the morning and then once in the evening. It was when I started doing essentially this massive detox program, which consisted, again, of a lot of cardio, and there was a couple actual liver flushes. I know this seems a little woo-woo, but I went and researched a lot of it. There's mechanisms to explain the efficacy of this. Google the Andreas Moritz liver cleanse. That's when I actually started to feel better. After those cleanses, after the massive detox, lots of running every single day of my life, lots of water, and then bringing in the alpha lipoic acid, okay? So it took me, all in all, about 2 years to recover. Once I discovered the detox strategies, and that's what I needed to target via reading and understanding that oxidative stress was a major part of this, and that there perhaps was some sort of buildup of toxic substances in my mitochondria that I needed to get rid of. And then I also need to facilitate liver functioning as a result of the Epstein-Barr virus. That's what it does. It attacks the liver. That's when, once I understood that, it took me just about 2 months to go from 20-30% capacity to about 80% capacity, right? Major jump in just 2 months. And then thereafter, it took me 2 or 3 months to get back to 100% thereafter, really following, protocols using ALA and all this stuff. All right. So that's the basis of it. That's why I think ALA is such a significantly important nootropic compound. Oxidative stress, we have reactive oxygen species, and oxidative damage in the body and or the brain is such a significant problem. It will make you feel terrible, right? We're now beginning to see, it looks like in the research, that this thing, oxidative stress, is at the root of many diseases, many chronic diseases, and absolutely, provingly, at the root of chronic fatigue syndrome, okay? Major salient points. Chronic fatigue syndrome, if you've got it from Epstein-Barr virus, if you've got it from heavy metal toxicity, essentially is a toxicity of your cells. It is an impairment in your mitochondria. One of the best ways to help this is to truly activate the body's natural detoxification systems. You do that via cardio. Cardio is one solid way to get your lymphatic system particularly moving. You do that via making sure your bowels move every day, and sometimes twice a day if you can. Lots of particular types of fiber. I mean, basically, I would say just eat oatmeal. Eat oatmeal in the morning, Make sure you eat oatmeal. A good cup of coffee helps gut motility in the morning and will help some things move through. If you're going to eat something like that has fat in it or has protein in it, fine, do so. Just make sure you can digest it well. The problem that people have with slow bowels is they're not digesting food. A lot of the times it's because they're missing hydrochloric acid, stomach acid. So betaine HCl is a great supplement to take for that. Keep your bowels moving. Get particular types of fiber, oatmeal specifically. Some green juices, like blending some spinach with a banana, that's going to be significant. Bananas alone are significant for moving the bowels. You got to have that fiber. People go on the ketogenic diet for so long and they wonder why they're constipated. It is because of that. That is a problem. You need to bring that fiber in. And then, after you've got the bowels moving and you got your detox systems working the way they're supposed to, or at least you're speeding them up by cardio exercise, drinking a lot of water, maybe even saunas, sweating. The alpha lipoic acid is really that last necessary step that folks are going to need to bring in to really tone up detoxification and, targeting oxidative stress in the body. Very critically important. That is my take on it. For more, every situation is different. I try to kind of run through the gamut of things that help with chronic fatigue syndrome and kind of illustrating it via my experience. But if you're somebody who has chronic fatigue syndrome, look, livecortex.com, livecortex.com, livecortx.com. We've got a consulting program. I will work with you on this. I can help you. I can help you fix it. I can help you identify what the problem is, whether it's gut bacteria, whether it's mitochondrial dysfunction, whether it's aldosterone and you need to fix that, up your salt intake, fix your adrenal glands. There's protocols for this and they work. Okay, they actually do work. Get that at livecortex.com. It's called Chronic Fatigue Syndrome Consulting. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Share this if you loved it. Check us out on the web at livecortex.com, at livecortex.com/blog, giant blog for nootropics information, performance enhancing information. All of our products right now, all of the digital nootropic stack lists, as well as the Cortex product, 20% off right now. Cortex, our powerful nootropic stack, $27 right now. It is essential that we move a lot of that because we got inventory coming up. We're trying to move the inventory we have and re-up on inventory. Our loss is your gain. $27 right now for the mighty Cortex nootropic stack. Very powerful stack, guys. No BS. Strong nootropic stack at livecortex.com. All of our digital guides are also 20% off. They've got the most expert level nootropic stacks on the planet in those guides. And then our most popular product, again, is the Nootropic Starter Pack. That's a bottle of Cortex and Smarter, Better, Faster, which is our digital guide that teaches you how to use nootropics, gives you many stacks, gives you many instructions. Get all that stuff at livecortex.com. Don't wait, because that special is ending super soon. If you're listening to this on the weekend, just make it happen. If you're listening sometime after, email me at ryan@livecortex.com, ryan@livecortex.com, and I'll give you a coupon code so we can make it so that you kind of get the special too. Either way, elite level nootropic products at livecortex.com. Make it happen. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Rock on.